Our schools are teaching gender ideology, which is a doctrine, a set of beliefs, and they're teaching it as if they are facts. If we saw this happening in Korea, North Korea or China, we'd call it indoctrination. And that's what it is in Aotearoa, New Zealand too. Our schools are indoctrinating our children. And the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education are funding organisations like Inside Out and Gender Minorities Aotearoa to the tune of millions of dollars. And make no mistake, these organisations, which purport to support rainbow youth, are trans advocates more than they are rainbow supporters. Try going onto their website as a young lesbian and see how supported you feel. The word isn't even mentioned. And yet these two organisations, which don't have one qualified teacher between them, are recommended by the Ministry of Education as the experts that schools can use to teach our children about aspects of the relationship and sexuality education curriculum. And they can also use them to run professional development workshops for our teachers. Schools are supporting a social movement, which is converting young lesbians and to a lesser extent young gay men to adopt a trans identity. A large proportion of young people who think they are trans are gay or lesbian and trying to find a way to deal with what is still, despite the changes of the last 30-something years, unacceptable. It is not acceptable as a young person to say that you're lesbian. Internalised homophobia is still alive and well. If you don't want your children to be taught gender ideology, you have the legal right to withdraw them from their classes. However, this right is being thwarted by the Ministry's instruction to schools that gender inclusiveness should be embedded into all subject areas. So this essentially means that even if a parent withdraws their children from RSE classes, they're still being exposed to all of these ideas which are presented to them as facts in the other classes that they attend. So there are widespread and significant implications of this ideology in schools. Ideas and beliefs are disguised as facts, and this is probably the most important thing. Gender identity is not a fact. There's absolutely no evidence that it exists. It's just a belief that some people hold. Ideas are put into children's heads. I'm trans becomes a solution to many problems, including mental health problems that a child might have. And when a child decides that they're trans, which it's pretty much guaranteed that mental health problems will be ignored, because being trans is the solution to everything. Girls are disadvantaged in schools with this ideology. They're disadvantaged because they have to share toilets with boys who pee all over the seats and all over the floors, and little girls of 5 years old are having to clean the toilets before they can use them. We have documented evidence of this happening in New Zealand. And any child who thinks that they're the opposite sex can choose which toilet they use. So a 16 or a 17-year-old boy can use the girls' toilets, and girls have absolutely no right to object or say that they don't want that to happen. And secrecy is encouraged. The ministry is told by Inside Out, schools are told by Inside Out and by the ministry that they should keep a child's social transition secret from their parents if that's what the child wants. And with the BDMRR legislation coming into effect next week, we've also got safety issues happening in schools. Schools may well not know the real sex of a child, either because they start school or come new to a school as an older child. And if you don't know the child's real sex, how are you going to manage safety issues on school trips with overnight stays, for example? And also teachers are in an invidious position. Some believe in trans ideology, others don't. But they have no choice but to follow the school guidelines. They have no support and no guidance from their professional body or from their union, and they risk losing their jobs if they speak up. And that has happened to more than one teacher. So what do we need to do? What can you do? The most important thing we can do is to ask questions. Ask questions, ask questions. Talk to teachers, talk to the principal, talk to the Board of Trustees. Ask them what they're doing for Pride Week, and then pull it apart if you need to. Put the onus back on them. Find out when the school is having its community consultation on how they're going to teach relationships and sexuality education. Have your say. Remember, schools are obliged to consult every 2 years, and it needs to be a proper consultation. You can visit our website if you want more information and resources. You can sign up for our newsletter. And if you've got a personal experience or you know someone who has, send us your story. We're very happy to put it up anonymously on our website. And finally, Resist Gender Education believe that all children have the fundamental right to go through puberty and to reach adulthood with their fertility and their sexual function intact. And gender ideology, with its focus on the rights of children and adolescents to take puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, puts them at risk of losing these rights. Thank you. And now we have Jan Rivers from Public Good. And also from Lava.
Kia ora koutou. My name's Jan Rivers and I'm a gender heretic. I don't believe that children are ever born in the wrong body. I'm a heretic against the emerging state doctrine of gender theory. I don't believe that attraction is based on gender. I believe it's based on sex. And I don't believe that gender treatment for children is ever good for them. And I'm here for, and I'd like to outline a number of reasons why I'm a heretic and why that belief should be protected. So first of all, I'm here to fight misinformation. A number of journalists in our New Zealand journalism are telling lies about puberty blockers. So I'm calling out Rachel Thomas, Mark Dulder, Hayden Donnell, Jane Fair, Russell Brown and many others who fail to make even the slightest investigation into what's happening overseas. We've never had what's happening overseas with gender medicine for children covered in New Zealand in a way that is transparent and honest. The only things that have happened have been that private individuals have had op-eds, so there are very few journalists covering this at the moment. The second reason is reasons of freedom of belief. Our Bill of Rights provides for freedom of belief. How can I, as a lesbian, support young lesbian women unless I acknowledge that I don't believe that there is an actual state of being transgender? I believe some people want to live in a way that's atypical for their gender, and I support them in that belief and in the way that they want to live their lives. But to develop an entire belief system of validation that affects everyone and binds them into a belief system is entirely wrong. We need to defend New Zealand's secular and pluralistic aspects of our democracy. We should be very concerned about the emergence of new doctrines that cut across this secular and pluralistic society. There are strong arguments that gender ideology is the evidence of the formation of a new kind of individualistic identitarian religion, a religion of personal identity, with its own heresies, incantations, rituals, coming out, post-operative photos and annual celebrations. There is now in New Zealand a transgender celebratory event in every calendar month except January. And even those events that formerly supported the gay and lesbian community have now been co-opted to support the transgender community. A third reason why I don't believe in gender theory, gender doctrine, is is a kind of spiritual belief. I don't believe that people are best served by trying to live other lives than the lives that in the bodies that they have as bodies. I don't believe that it's healthy to tell people that their best lives are lived as someone else because they can't bear who they are. How can that be healthy? As Alice Drager has said, it's unclear why helping a female child become a boy is somehow a better clinical goal than helping a female child become a girl. And yes, unless you de facto value transgender identity over cisgender identity, if you're neutral on the identity outcome, and if what you're aiming to do is to reduce harms, then the evidence we have suggests that the best way to do that is to try and have a child end up happy with the body he or she was born with, because that will mean fewer invasive medical interventions. And only if that doesn't work should you ever aid in transition. As for non-binary people, as Joanna Williams has said in an article in 2020, for the overwhelming majority, declaring yourselves to be neither male nor female is to deny biological reality. It's to say, though all those pesky things, such as chromosomes and hormones and genitalia, do not apply to you, your feelings, more finely tuned than everyone else's, override the inconvenience of a body. But New Zealand is in thrall to gender ideology. How many government departments in buildings around Parliament have been told, have told the staff today that if they're too distressed by us meeting, that they don't need to come into work today? In every government department, people are using preferred pronouns without any consideration about whether this conflicts with their ability to provide free and frank advice. Including about gender medicine, about fair policy for women and children, about service delivery. How can a person think critically about gender medicine when they are bound ideologically to the view that self-identified gender is more important than sex? Another reason why I don't support gender theory is that we're supporting an ideology that engages people in ideas that they really don't believe in themselves. In the podcast, The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling, the transgender woman Natalie Wynn talks about the way that some trans people wield power online, and including why that power is sometimes wielded so fiercely. Wynn said, a lot of extremely online trans people really don't have a strong sense of conviction of their own identity. That's why they need constant external evaluation to prop them up. They need to constantly be told that they are valid, that they are the gender that they say they are. And if anyone even obliquely threatens or suggests their fragile self-concept, they lash out. And for some of those trans people, cancelling celebrities on social media is the only kind of power they have. This is the people who have celebrations every month and who are supported by the entirety of corporate New Zealand and the government. They have no power. They are weak. Because the quality of transgender research is appalling. Transgender research in New Zealand starts from the preface that there is an identian worldview. It's carried out by transgender people themselves, and it's done from the perspective of the newly emerging field of transgender epistemology. Counting ourselves has multiple reasons why people detransition. It doesn't call it detransitioning, it calls it retransitioning. But it says, and it will begin to be reported on soon, it asks for the reasons why people might detransition or change their mind about transitioning. All of the reasons, bar one, relate to external features, external pressure, lack of parental support, difficulty finding a job, or what the authors will no doubt call transphobia. But living, because living as trans is simply too difficult. In contrast, the actual research on detransitioners by academics like Van den Busch and Littman have a remarkable similarity in the reasons that they collect for detransition. People say, I came to realise that transition wasn't helping. I grew to understand that my distress about my body had other causes. We've got poor quality research. Another reason is my lived experience. I might be old, but surely my lived experience counts for something. As a child, I was a girl who hated accepting the socially imposed constraints of being female. At puberty, I hated the changes as a young adult. My same-sex attraction felt shameful and embarrassing. All these things made me wish being male was an option. I've heard that young women's explanations for being non-binary or transgender, and when I listen to them, none of them hold water, none of them go beyond the feelings that I had as a young woman. I can say that with absolute certainty. Transgender, another reason is faulty logic. Transgender activists say, if you feel like a woman, you are one. This is a category error. The word woman is already taken. It means something. It means sex and biology. It doesn't mean preferences or personality or behaviour. Finally, I'd like to speak about my main reason for wanting to oppose gender theory and the idea that there is a doctrine that we must follow. It's what young women in New Zealand have said about their detransition. 3 young women I've met who were previously identifying as male, and 2 of them have said to me that they lacked strong role models of gender non-conforming adults. They lacked an identifiable community to belong to. One young detransitioner said this on her video diary: I effectively went from being a little girl to a teenage boy pretty much overnight. It was the first 10 weeks of high school. It just blows my mind, actually, that I was allowed to do this. And I was endorsed to do this by medical professionals. They were the ones who put this into my mind, and she was actually asked at a psychotherapy, a counselling session, whether she thought she might be transgender. It sounded very exotic to her. They were the ones who put this in my mind, told me it was possible and supported me. They never gave me enough pushback to say there are other issues. They knew I was going through therapy, and I was very open about the fact that I'd been the victim of domestic violence and abuse by men. They knew I had trauma, having seen men being abusive towards women in my life and to me and my family. They knew I had issues. I was self-harming. I was depressed. I had so many issues, and instead of trying to figure out what those issues were, they just slapped this label of trans on me and sent me off on my way to transition. Looking back, I do think that was abusive in a way, to send a child, a literal child. I was 13 years old, I was barely a teenager. I had this idea put in my mind, and I don't blame myself. I did blame myself at first, at the start of my detransition. I felt stupid. I felt like I did this to myself, but now I don't. And I've heard a lot of stories of other detransitioned women like me who felt that they were pressured by medical professionals to continue down the road. But it was the fault of the system at the moment that we have trans kids. I was experiencing gender dysphoria, but it wasn't because I was trans. It was because I felt safer in a male body, and I was vulnerable and hurting. That's why I'm in this fight. Thank you very much. I'd like to hand over to Tanya.
Hi, I'm Tanya Sturt, and I'm speaking on behalf of Women Act. One of the more well-known concerns about gender identity ideology, and in particular sex self-ID legislation, is in the case of women's prisons. There's good reason for concern. Women are automatically vulnerable when they're incarcerated. They lose free will in many ways. Often they come from backgrounds which include trauma, addictions, abuse and mental health issues. Like every other single-sex space, single-sex prisons arose from the understanding that women are at risk of abuse if men have unregulated access to the same spaces designated for women. Internationally, there are reports of trans prisoners being placed in women's prisons and raping and assaulting the other prisoners. In recent years, the Department of Corrections in New Zealand has been allowing transgender individuals into prisons of the sex they identify with. Policy has been that if they are convicted of sexual offences against women, they will not be put in women's prisons, but that does not include violent offences or low-level sexual offending. I recently spoke to a woman who is an ex-prisoner about her experiences being imprisoned alongside two trans-identified males. At this stage, I want to make it clear that I'm not here to malign any particular individual's behaviour. I'm coming at this from a government department protocol perspective and to give an idea of how this may play out in real life. I'll call this ex-prisoner Jane. She described her incarceration, which began in early 2017 at Arahata Correctional Facility, a women's prison here in Wellington. At the time she was sentenced, there were two trans-identified males, biological males, also incarcerated in Arahata, though in different units. One of the trans-identified males, Jane did not know well and said he passed quite well. The other, who I'll call Tim, was a cross-dresser rather than a transsexual, and he had had no surgery and probably no hormones. There were no changes to his physical body. He was given a separate cell on his own, and Jane believed this was because he still had male genitals. This is confirmed as standard practice by the Prison Operations Manual in its current form, where it outlines the level of support given to transgender individuals. In that same document, it's made clear that trans people are required to be provided with all trans-related clothing accessories as needed, for example, chest binders and tucking tape, as well as underwear. Jane does mention that for some reason Tim was allowed to wear steel-capped boots, whereas none of the women were. Looking through the operations manual, the language is framed around mitigating risk to the trans person. It makes it clear that the trans person is allowed to determine the officer's sex, who is going to perform the bodily searches, and that the officers are required to abide by this preference. Jane went on to describe situations where Tim would barter his prescribed medication in return for getting the woman to flash him. Eventually, Tim was caught in sexual relationships with some female prisoners in one of the work parties and was transferred to Auckland Women's Prison. Jane wants to make it clear that the flashing and sexual relationships were consensual as far as she knew, and she says some women were just keen to engage in heterosexual encounters. She said that Tim was generally well liked, and the other woman appeared not to have an issue with Tim being in a woman's prison, but she did acknowledge that a younger or inexperienced woman may well feel more vulnerable or violated by that situation. She herself says that she doesn't agree with biological males being in a woman's facility and that it's quite wrong to put women in that position. The Prison Operations Manual specifically outlines the current process for determining which prison the trans-identified prisoner will be sent. It's made clear in that document that the birth certificate is adhered to as a priority when determining that choice. The BDMRR Act will allow an easy change of biological sex marker on the birth certificate. The consultation with the Department of Corrections that a number of groups were invited to last year indicated they were considering the option for removing the birth certificate as the prioritised determining factor, just one of the factors, and instead will look at other factors as well, such as a gender identity and risk of harm.
Please speak up, please.
Sure.
Thanks.
There is an expectation that this option will be taken once the Act comes into effect. I'd like to note that at no point is there any reference to determining how genuine the gender identity is. As in all other areas, people are required to take their word for it. As someone who worked in corrections for a decade, I am very aware of the risk of allowing people with or without criminal histories the ability to easily alter their identity footprint. For prisoners, it can be about access to sexual partners of your sexual orientation and decreased risk of male violence. For others, it can be about hiding past criminal behaviour and history behind a new name of official documents. Ultimately, it comes down to the fact that women are not shields for men to hide behind while they play dress up, and women should not be mere receptacles for making men's lives easier. This is one of the most troubling aspects of this ideology, and it will continue to be played out in women's single-sex spaces like prisons. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
Just in case you had any doubts, remember, because there's men that go around telling themselves that they are lesbian. And they're a disgrace, we're insulted, we're disgusted, we're not having any of it. I'm from Lesbian Resistance, one of a couple. We stand on the street corner at Fielding and we talk to the public. Because what we have to do is spread this word and wake people up. Our aim is to get people to talk to others and to talk to others and to talk to others and spread it like a grassroots movement. And so far, we're finding that everyone, that just about 95% of people that come up to us, because we let them come to us, and they all know there's something really wrong going on. And they can't put a word to it, so we can. And we also encourage them to speak up. Because this whole ideology is based on a lie. That's all it is. A big lie. And I know what it's like to tell a lie. It starts to chip away at your integrity, your dignity, and eventually your confidence goes, and you end up a shell of who you should be. All because of a lie. And when you stop telling that lie, you get so empowered. Well, if you stop telling it now, your empowerment starts right now. And that lie is that men can become women and women can become men. They can't. And we have the truth, we have reality, and we have biology on our side. And we also are the majority, the silent majority, but we have to speak up. We can't just say, good on you for speaking up, because it's not easy. If you don't have the courage to come forward and speak up, stand behind someone who does. Support them, give them money. Spread this word. Do some education. You've heard a lot here today. You can't say you can go away and not know anything. Now, one of the things that they also use is language. Just don't use it. That's why we're called resistance. Resist. Resist, resist, resist everything. We can't change anything right now, but we can sure as hell stall it. We can make it uncomfortable. We can make it not happen as easily. Don't hand it over to them. So when you fill in forms and it's got gender, cross it out, put sex. When you go to your doctor or the hospital, just do a resistance all the time. Do not use their language. Do not use their preferred pronouns. We have them. That is the lie. And if you're too afraid not to stand in front of a 6'4" huge hunking guy wanting to be called a she, then just say, well, no thanks, I don't subscribe to that ideology. I know sometimes it can be dangerous, just don't do it, walk away. Now, as long as we can if we can keep stalling them, they will start turning on each other, because that's exactly what's going to happen, and it's starting to happen now. They will start turning on each other because the whole ideology is based on picking on each other. And we just have to stand forward firm. Women, we're half the population of everywhere. Speak up. Find that courage. Women have fought, died, bled for us to be where we are now. Don't hand it over to them. Resist. Keep resisting. Be proud of being female. Be proud of being a woman. And do not go into that lie. Now, all this stuff, some of it's been covered by Marg and Suzanne and who was before? It's all been said there before, but you must get the courage and speak out. And because a few things I want to say, but one day these kids are going to get older, these kids that are getting mutilated and brainwashed now, and they're going to turn around and they're going to say, what were you doing? What did you do to stop this? What are you going to tell them? Everybody here cannot say that they didn't know, because you do know now. And your job, your homework is to go and tell some more and get them to tell some more and spread this. Have the courage. You don't have to get angry. You don't have to be nasty. You just say, no, I'm not going along with that. It's bullshit. Just stick to it and be brave, and we will get there. And I think that's all I want to say, because I don't want to go on and on.
You've got one more. Yep. Thank you. Just point it that way. Yeah. It's sorry, it's obviously flick around again. There you go.
He's just down the back.
they barged through the barriers and pushed us into the middle there and screamed and yelled at us. That was not Te Aroha. That was not Tato Tato A. Join the Women's Rights Party so that we could show these people, so that we could show Chris Hipkins, we know what a woman is. Thank you, Jill. I would like to say that it was some stats released this week, I think, to say that most New Zealanders do not wish harm on transgender people, and we don't wish to discriminate. And I was really glad to read that, and I think it's true. I think the issue is not discrimination. It's not human rights. We all have human rights. The rights that they are asking for are the rights to spaces and facilities and services that are designated for the opposite sex, and that is not a human right. Hello. For the second time I'm here in front of Parliament, in front of you all lovely people. I get to turn up, I get to stand up, and I get to speak. I'm still the angry Mormor that wants to make sure that my granddaughter has access to single-sex spaces, that it's safe when she plays competitive sports. I'm here to make sure that no hulking 50-year-old man cannot self-ID as a girl and crush her in the sports field, both physically and mentally, or use the girls' changing rooms as his own personal live stream kiddie porn fetish peep show. I refuse to let boys and men take trophies and prize money and scholarships specifically designed for our girls and women. I am here today to tell those who do not know, or maybe do not understand, some of the consequences of these new self-ID laws. It's not just about those who want to use the public toilets. It's much more insidious, and it will become deeply ingrained in our society. If the popo over there decide to arrest me under these new self-ID laws, a police officer with the lady feels can legally strip search me, and there seems to be fuck all I can do about it. I can't even refuse to be strip searched by a male-bodied police officer with the lady feels, as I would be breaking the law by misgendering him. And this will be recorded as a hate crime. This, I believe, will apply to airplane security, strip search, bodily cavity searches of women. These can legally be carried out by men who say they are women. This terrifies me. As you can imagine, with hair like mine over 26 years, I've had more than my fair share of random close inspections at various airports around the world. In 2023 in New Zealand, I feel I've come out of a coma and I've woken up in a dystopian world, gone mad, where men can be anything he says he is, yet women are now birthing people, chest feeders, and uterus havers, where victimhood is now a virtue, where biological facts no longer seem to matter, where the young worship at the altar of the deranged gods of the pronoun. And you will lose your job for not affirming the mental illness of a work colleague tottering around in high heels complaining about his period pains. We need to remember that men's discomfort in men's spaces does not grant them the right to make women uncomfortable in women's spaces. I refuse to move over and make space for these men. Not now, not never. I want my granddaughter to know I will fight to my last breath to protect the sex-based rights, and will shout with pride that Mormor is a TERF. And to know that it's not hate to speak the truth. Thank you. Hi.
everyone. We've got to the end of our 1 hour of being allowed to have the speaker going, given it's a sitting day here in Parliament. So thank you so much for turning up. I know we're not the biggest crowd here, but we are going to keep turning up. We will be heard. We're not going anywhere. So having said that, we are going somewhere. In Nelson next month, July the 22nd, we're going to be hosting a turn-up event. It's a Saturday late morning, I think it'll be. Watch this space for details. So thank you. Thanks very much. Hi, most of you may be aware that it's Pride Week in schools.